Hello and welcome to another episode of Life Alchemy, the podcast which brings together diverse coaches with our diverse life experiences in relatively informal conversations, which also give you golden nuggets for how you can transform your life, your business, your world with the advice that we walk our talk with, which we live our lives by, with the advice which we help our clients, our coaching, and also in my case, therapy clients with, and just general observations we've had about life. So I'm Rosalind Palmer, and I'm joined with my co-hosts today, Chris and Sarah. And today we are talking about upper limits. Now, I'm a bit older than Chris and Sarah, which because I've got good lighting and makeup, you wouldn't necessarily know. But when I came through certainly agency life, because I worked in agency life in London in the 80s and the 90s, not so much the 90s, but definitely 80s, we heard that word glass ceiling a lot, and it's obviously a word that is used often in the context of women or maybe minorities or maybe people who are not the natural people in that workplace who find it, that easy to succeed because they're the outlier, they're the outsider. And the glass ceilings is where you kind of hit your head and you find that for some reason you don't seem to be going any further. Well, we're talking today really about upper limits, because upper limits are really about the glass ceilings, if you like, that you impose upon yourself. And they can be due to lots of reasons. A lot of it can be to do with how you feel about yourself, the fundamental I am not enough, I do not feel enough. Imposter syndrome would be another perfect example. I feel like I'm winging it and somebody's going to find out. It can be to do with what's referred to as rules, which are bullshit rules, which are those mantras which you've maybe grown up with or around and you don't even realize you have. Money is the root of all evil. Therefore, you're holding yourself back from maybe being very rich or wealthy because there's just a part of you going, no, this is not a good idea. Whatever it is, you often hit your own upper limits without realizing that you're holding yourself back. So we're going to really see what that means to everybody. So what are your thoughts, guys, on our great topic for today?
Do you know, as you were talking there, I was when you were going through that list, I was thinking, yeah, got that one. Had that one. It's like a swapping stickers at school session.
Did you get a full house, Chris? Did you get a full house?
I nearly got a full house. Nearly got a full house there. Absolutely. I think, obviously, when we were talking about doing this subject, I was thinking about, well, the fear of success, is it a real thing? But actually, there's certain areas of my life that, obviously, I come from a sporting background. That's where I made my kind of previous life, if you like. So from a physical point of view, I didn't have any of that. I had a little bit of imposter syndrome, but I didn't have that hold yourself back. My good friend, Dr. Morris Duffy, who's a fantastic coach and speaker, he says it's almost like having one foot on the accelerator and one hand on the handbrake. Once you realize where that handbrake is, it's a question of letting it go. The next stage from that is realizing there was never a handbrake in the first place. It was just a story. It was something you made up.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because, I wasn't frightened of success in sport, but I did witness so many people touch the wall and change their lives overnight. They get a fast race, right place, right time. Other people underperform, they outperform themselves, and all of a sudden, everyone wants to know what they're doing, how they're eating, how they're sleeping, everything. And now they're the center of this attention. So I can understand from that point of view that people are frightened of what happens when you're successful.
Oh, it's quite scary, isn't it? I mean, I follow somebody on LinkedIn and they're called the Lonely Leader.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's something funny enough in my own course, the Realigned Leader, that the leaders on the course, when they were having conversations with themselves, hit upon very early that it's actually quite lonely at the top.
Yeah.
You haven't got that many people to refer to, and it's a bit like being the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. You don't want Toto to pull the curtain back and go, oh, actually, I'm just cranking a wheel and winging it. So yeah, I think that's very true. What are your thoughts, Sarah?
So I've just been looking. I've just discovered a new word related to this: achievemophobia.
Oh wow!
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that. Wow, I like that word. So yeah, I completely agree. Again, from what you've both been saying, I can totally relate, and I've definitely got those. I can tick those boxes as well. But the thing that's actually struck me today, which I hadn't considered before, was what you were saying, Chris, about that it's only in some areas of your life. So for me, it's not like a blanket, and I'm sure it's probably the same for other people as well. But in career and at work, I've never had a phobia of progressing or doing well. I've never feared interviews. Like I've never been nervous in interviews. But when it comes to things such as money, like pricing strategies and things like that, I definitely have some, I have to make an effort to work on these like money mindset blockers. So when it comes to fear of succeeding in that respect, that's definitely attached to those negative beliefs about, money is bad and I should be serving for free, and people need help and things like that. And then also so different areas, it depends what the areas are. And also the fact that in a way it is, and you both touched on it, it's the unknown, isn't it? So whether it's good or bad, it's completely unknown, and you have no idea how that's going to change your life or change your relationships, etc. So it's, for me, I think it's the unknown, and it depends on the area of life. So it's not like across the board.
Do you think it comes down to, when you do find out what that block is, do you get excited or daunted?
Excited, because it's a way you can do something about it.
I think knowledge is power, and when you see the thing, you know that you can change it.
And that's the thing. I think it's all about kind of breaking it down. We used to come out of races. I used to come out of races a lot, and I'd say to my coach, "Oh, that was a rubbish race." And straight away off the bat, he would say, "There's no such thing as a rubbish race. There might be rubbish elements of it, but it's not a rubbish race. There's something you've done there that's really good, and there's other stuff that need to be worked on." And I think that's the key, is when you broad brush something with just one term and you bin it, you've wasted an opportunity. It was maybe the turns or the starts weren't so good, or maybe your fitness or your speed. There will be an element of it that wasn't so good. And that's where we used to get excited in sport. Where I used to get a little bit daunted, and I still probably do to this day actually, is just the intellectual stuff. That's probably where my blockers are. So when I think about if I'm not good enough, it's always around I'm not bright enough. And I think back to conversations I had when I was at college. I remember failing the A levels really badly. I know we spoke about this before the call, but I failed mine in the first semester. So before Christmas, I got booted out of college. didn't
you did really well. You were really good at that.
Yeah, I really went for it. You're going to go hard. And I remember the biology teacher, the A-level teacher, lecturer, pulled me to one side. And I thought I'd done all right, because I thought there was room for improvement. But she was having the talk with me, little did I know, of, "You're done, son, you're out, you're gone." And her first opening line was, "What went wrong?" And I was just like, what? I wasn't expecting her to ask that.
And
I didn't have an answer. And it haunted us for ages. And
that's a really bad question.
Yeah, it is.
Wearing my therapist hat, a lot of times, even under hypnotherapy, when people are going to that deepest level of making sense of something, often it's times like that come up, and it's that feeling of something went wrong. And I don't know what it was, or I don't know why it went wrong, or I don't know what I did or didn't do that would have changed it. And often that's in childhood, because of course you can't, and so they'll go back to some really not necessarily overly traumatic, but some childhood experience where, as an empathetic, caring child, maybe they wanted to help their parent you know, who knows what the situation was. You can think of 1,000 scenarios, I'm sure you can, but let's take a really extreme example. You know, mum's in a drunken stupor on the sofa and something's wrong in the house. You know, the chip pan has caught fire, let's say. I'm using a very extreme example. But as a child, you know, it's up to you to kind of solve that situation, but you kind of don't know what to do. And then maybe the next thing is the door's being battered in and the fire brigade have come and rescued you. And so, of course, it's a traumatic experience, but the big thing that lingers, even beyond the, my mum didn't take care of me and la, 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 is I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how. Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's that thing that dogs them at some sort of deep psychological level. You know, they're now CEO of a massive company or something, and that feeling of when push comes to shove, I don't know what to do, and that's really disempowering. That's fascinating. At the risk of turning this into a personal therapy session, no, let's go for it. You've totally unlocked something for me there, because, you know, I will classically come out with things like, even now at like 43, I'll say, oh, I'm not so good at exams, or I just couldn't get it right in exams. And a lot of it probably does stem back to that moment. And I ended up taking the BTEC route, which is more kind of handing in coursework. It's not exam based, and I absolutely flew it, got the marks to go to one of the best unis I've been to. And yeah, the rest was history, but I didn't touch exams since then. And it's the intellectual stuff that I feel as though I worry that if I did break that ceiling and was successful in that area, I'd have to keep that up. And I think that's the fear. That's the deep rooted fear of, I don't know how to keep that up. And you might have, and you know, I've got academics in my family, and it's not actually always a joyful path. Yeah, I'll be honest. You know, it doesn't seem like the best fun in the world. You know, they're super clever and got amazing jobs and do incredible work, but it's quite a difficult environment to be in, I must say. Yeah. You know, I look at it and I think I'd rather be a gardener.
You know what? I was thinking that what's coming up for me in this discussion about intellect is, and everything you've said, Chris, I completely relate to. Although in primary school and secondary school, you know, I really didn't have to make an effort, but I really didn't make an effort. I just kind of, if I knew I could just wing it, I just did. But then it wasn't until I left, and I actually took the BTEC route as well, because I dropped out of A levels because I was bored, so I went to art college and I did a national diploma. But when I got there, I wasn't at the top, and then all these other people it was really competitive, and I really struggled, and it was really kind of hit me, and I thought, oh God, I can't just wing it nowadays. Actually, I'm going to have to make an effort because I need to compete with these other people. And that was the first experience I had of that. And then going on to, and again, I had that a bit of a not a chip, but a bit of a hang up, because then I went to university, but I did a HND in you know, graphic design, and so I didn't have like the degree kind of thing. And then that was like you were saying earlier, Ros, you know, so when I went to the working world and was with all of these like Cambridge and Oxford. I didn't have the right degree from the I was like, oh my God. But then, and I've struggled with that too for a long time, until I started to question what actually intellect is. So we have this assumption that intellect is doing well with academia, but actually, when we think about it, a lot of the time that is actually just being able to retain knowledge. It's about being knowledgeable. So intellect is things like when you were saying, like, can you handle stuff on your feet? You know, do you have the capacity to understand complex concepts, to be creative? You don't need to follow by the book because you've got the capacity to, you know, for me, that's what intellect is. I think there's this confusion about having lots of knowledge because you've studied really hard about a certain subject. That's knowledge, not intellect. Yeah. My post yesterday on LinkedIn, which I know you will have seen, Chris, was taken from a post from Richard Branson, who'd been asked the question, is IQ or EQ more important? And Richard Branson is, whatever you think about Richard Branson, you know, it doesn't matter.
He's the archetypal EQ success story. You know, like he said, he was a failure at school, if you like. He did not do well. He left with, you know, very little or no qualifications. And he, I suppose in other people's parlance, winged it, but in his world, you know, went with that instinct, went with that EQ. And I did a survey, and it's come out way more that people value EQ. That's very interesting. Whether they recruit against that or not, I'm not sure, but certainly within my own PR company that I ran in the 90s, I figured that one out quite quickly. At first, I had this slight intellectual inferiority complex where I was like getting people with double firsts from Oxford, and then I had to fire somebody, and she actually told me on the exit interview, oh, I wondered how long it would take you to work out that I've just got a photographic memory. It was like, photographic memory, but absolutely no common sense whatsoever. And in That's PR, crazy. You've got to think on your feet.
Yeah.
You've got to hustle. You've got to do all these things. And having somebody who's like going, oh, excuse me, what's the rule? You know, just didn't work.
Yeah,
that's so interesting about EQ, because you're so right. But I'm of the massive belief that as a youngster, it doesn't necessarily serve you so well, because obviously you've got a lot of emotions going on, a lot of chemical imbalance as you're growing through your teenage years. So for a long time, I always knew my strength was emotional intelligence. I've always known that for a while. Like, my outer harmony is the thing that kind of connects me to the rest of the world. You know, people feel that, and they'll say that quite a bit. And in different areas, people will say the same thing. So I'll meet a completely different group of people and they'll say the same thing, unrelated. And there was a moment in time when I was probably in my late teens, early 20s, where I went through a patch where people were like, oh, you're just too sensitive, Chris. You're far too sensitive. Yeah. And I really, for the rest of my 20s, a good portion of my 20s, I tried to stifle that and hide it, because I thought it was a weakness to the rest of the world. And it was only until I started to realize that actually emotional intelligence is something that other people can see and feel, and that's what connects you to the rest of the world. That's when I started to go, do you know what, I'm going to use this. I'm going to go for it. Even if it does get me into a place where people think you're far too emotional. I just think you're too sensitive to the wrong people. I think that's the difference. It's the wrong people.
It's rules again, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You know, I was told, oh, you need to toughen up. You know, if you toughened up, you'd do better.
Yeah.
And you do kind of toughen up, but you pay a price for it.
Yeah, you do.
Ultimately, you're still you inside, and then that's how imposter syndrome comes along. Yeah. You're living a lie. You're not really being authentic.
I think again, sort of about fitting in, isn't it? It's like when you're a child, fitting in, being like everyone else. You know, this is what you should be like. This is the norm. Yeah. And I think it's just about actually just celebrating the differences, because some kids are academic, some kids are very entrepreneurial, some kids, you know, everyone's different. And I think in schools there should be a lot more about, you know, like with the coaching, the stuff that we, you know, that kind of education, about your mindset, having a growth mindset, being creative, you know, and just the kind of work that I do around identity is actually figuring out, like, who are you? What do you enjoy?
What's your mojo? What's your
thing? Yeah, because if you don't enjoy something and you're not interested, you're definitely not going to remember it, you know. And I think that happens in school, because I can't remember anything about history or geography because I was just so uninterested. I can't remember a thing. And I think that's part of it as well. Again, it's not an intellect, it's about what interests you. And if you can find out what it is that you enjoy, then you're just going to excel.
And I think it's also about not beating yourself up for what you haven't done well.
What you lack.
History's made me think of that, Sarah. So I didn't do history at school because it was back in the day when you had to take a certain amount of sciences, a certain amount of art subjects, a certain amount of other things. And so for some reason, I ended up not doing history, not even at O-level. I did economics, I did geography, you know, and I always felt like a dunce, you know. I'd be really good on pub quizzes, sitting watching Mastermind and everything. You know, I'm pretty good on general knowledge, not history. You know, like it'll get to the kings and queens of England, and I'll be like, oh, it's all a blur. And I had actually, truth be told, I had a bit of a grasp because having done a degree in English literature, you have to learn the historical context of a lot of the literature. So I'd be able to go, oh yeah, that happened in Shakespeare's time, or that happened in Jane Austen's time, or that happened in, you know, but I really did feel a bit of a duffer on that one, I must say. And now I watch history programs with an absolute relish. I've just watched I think it was called The Tudor Bastards. I would highly recommend it. It's absolutely brilliant. It's about Henry Tudor and Edward VII, and it goes from sort of 1460s through about 100 years. And look, I'm remembering it all because I'm really fascinated now. Yeah, I'm playing Fill the Gap in now just for my own joy.
It's true what you're saying though, like you do put these kind of limits on yourself based on what you repeat. I think a thought becomes a belief when it's repeated so much, doesn't it? And
you said that earlier, Chris, didn't you, about you had some of these mantras going on in your head, these stories about well, you're not very intellectual, or you're not,
that's it,
you know.
And there's another one for me. I think it was in a Mother Teresa quote years ago, and she said, you'll make some false friends. If you're successful, you make some false friends and some true enemies. And that stuck with me. And when I became successful in swimming, I started to see that happen.
Yeah.
I started to see an abundance of people who would just wrap themselves around us just to be in that kind of energy and feed off it. And I thought they were friends. I thought all of a sudden I become super popular overnight. This is amazing. And I kept them for a while. But then interestingly, when I went through maybe a dip in energy and a bit of a dark time, there was very, very, very few people there. And I started to see those kind of true enemies surface. And I just wonder sometimes whether it's kind of you plant it in the subconscious and then you almost go and seek it. You know, this, you seek the teeth that fit the wound type of vibe to it.
I think that's true. And I think also, if we're talking about upper limits, okay, I think one of the huge subconscious upper limits we constantly have about ourselves is, if I go beyond this, will I have true friends? And because we're tribal people and connection is our absolute fundamental, connection equals safe, being part of the tribe in the cave equals safe. If I'm different, if I go outside of it, equals not safe. I think one of the biggest upper limits is that, and we don't even realize we're doing it. And so there's you're like, I'm doing really well, I'm successful, you know, probably a lot of the people you used to relate to or hang out with, you know, probably aren't at the Olympics and doing all that you're doing. And of course, then you're like, well, I'm in a new tribe, let's join with that new tribe.
It's true.
But because it happens to be the new tribe that's literally in front of you, you don't maybe assess it and think, are these truly my people? And what happened to you is exactly that there.
Yeah.
Then you end up going, oh, these aren't very nice people.
Yeah.
And then what happens at that point is people will often go back to their original tribe and go, I'm not doing with all this fame and malarkey. It's far too awful. Nobody's a real friend. I don't know who to trust. I'm literally going back to Burnley and I'm going to work in the fish shop again. I mean, seriously, you see it happen.
You do.
People who win the lottery are a perfect example. You know, they move away, they get the big house, and then they go back and work in the biscuit factory because that's where their mates are, and they go down. The point is, along the way, you've got to constantly know who you are.
Yeah.
And when you know who you are and know you're enough and know what motivates you, you can keep the old friends or the ones who are still right. You can smash your upper limits, and you can enter that environment with the new people, the new rules, the new everything else, with a sense of yourself, not feeling like an imposter, not feeling like there was too high a price to pay.
That is such a good point. You've basically just mapped out my career there. You basically mapped it out, although I didn't go back to the fish and chip shop. Wish I had now, though.
Chris, there's time yet.
To be fair, the day I had yesterday, I might be going straight there.
I'd go to your fish and chip shop because you'd be so personable.
Got a lot of IQ, yeah. EQ, sorry. Yeah, I think that's the key though, is just understanding who you are. You've hit the nail on the head. Like, I don't feel like I lost myself. I don't think I've ever lost myself. I've definitely misplaced myself, and I've misplaced my skills in that as well, and over egged the ones that didn't fit at that time. And it just begins to smell of desperation at that point. So I've just learned, I learned a lot in that kind of short space of time, that 10 years. It was fabulous. Yeah.
Thinking about when you were saying, we were talking about the tribes, and I think it's really important and it takes a while to kind of figure out what your supportive ecosystem is.
Yeah.
And when I think about the kind of social circles that I have, I've got really close knit of friends that I've had since primary and secondary school. We're all still really good friends, and but all lived very different lives. Then I've got some friends close friends who I've lived with throughout the years, and built close relationships with, people I've worked with. And then when I started to work for myself, and I started to meet loads of people in that environment, from like startups to established business owners, and the stuff that's gone on with me this year, I'm a bit nervous about saying this, but during those early stages, when you meet, you make those new relationships, whether it's in like something to do with fame or career success or like business, whatever it is, where you're kind of moving into a new environment, like you were saying, Ros, this is all, you don't have a chance to kind of step back. And you're sharing this new experience together, and you kind of build this bond. And I have definitely learned in the last sort of this second half of the year that some relationships that I thought were more than that, I thought they were about more than work or actually would just work. And I've definitely felt a bit disappointed. And it's definitely made me now kind of take a step back and look at those groups, and think you do always, isn't it, like you always find out who. It's a test of your relationships, isn't it? Like when you're going through something.
We need to make something of this. There's another podcast. This is a fascinating one.
I think a podcast along the lines of Friends for a Reason, Friends for a Reason.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
definitely. We'll do that.
Get that down.
I'm making a note.
Get it down.
I remember. Because I remember someone in the very beginning, like a business advisor. And she'd said, she actually warned me about it. And she said, just to let you know that these are not your friends. Like, these are acquaintances. They're like business associates. They're not your friends. And I thought, no, that's not right. What is she talking about?
We're busy.
Yeah, it definitely. So I think I feel really grateful I have those friends, old school friends, who I know whatever happens with it, if I succeed or if I fail, they're always going to be there.
Do you know when you lose most friends is when you succeed?
No,
Chris, I think you're probably. I've been there. I've been a millionaire-ess. I've been not a millionaire-ess. I've been very high profile. I've been off on a desert island. You learn a lot about. Well, I think this is another podcast, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. Let's make this an extra long one.
An extra long podcast, because I'm aware of the time. So who to follow? Is there anybody who's influenced you in this area that's changed your thinking? I'll kick off. So I mentioned Bishan from APEST, who wrote the what is his book? The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, I think it's called. And he talks about rules, which is the bullshit rules. Breaking those, working out, does this work for me? Is this a rule I'm living by because I inherited it, or societally it was always said, we don't do this, people like us aren't this or that. And I think that's really powerful, because I think when you can break the rules, you're halfway there, you're halfway there. So for me, that would be while you do yours, I'll actually, apologies, Vishal, I'll find the correct name of your book. I shall reach behind myself. So over to you.
Go for it.
Who's influenced you in this way?
So for me, my good friend, Dr. Morris Duffy, you can go searching for him. He's fantastic. He's just got such a good way about him. But the thing that I've really learned from him is his analogy of 1 foot on the accelerator, 1 on the brake. And that kind of, often it's not about putting the foot down and creating more speed or more vigor. It's about releasing the friction and taking away the blockage and understanding what that is. So you don't need to put any more effort in. We just need to identify what the block is. And he really helped me in this stage of my life, really just figure that out. Even just from one phrase, I just walked away from thinking, that's exactly what I need to work on. He's a great person to follow.
What's his name again?
Dr. Morris Duffy.
Fantastic. Sarah?
Just a couple of things. So one is not a person, but it's Ikigai, the Japanese philosophy.
Right.
I think that's great to kind of, we've talked about figuring out what it is that you actually really enjoy, and that's something you're going to excel at. So figuring out what it is to kind of help you push your upper limits, because sometimes we don't even have any idea what our upper limits look like.
Yeah.
And then also one of the principles about it is that it's about taking small steps. So when you were talking earlier, Chris, about sometimes when you were doing your training and then you'd be given feedback saying, oh, well, you need to do this right. So it's about finding those things that you need to change. That is small steps, isn't it? That's iterations. And I think sometimes this fear of our upper limits is because we're looking at the whole thing. We're like imagining us there at the top, like, oh my God, what is that going to look like? Actually, if we just think, that's where I want to get to, is where I'm aiming for, but all I have to focus on right now is what the next step is.
Absolutely.
And that's it. And that's just that's come up for me, and I thought might help.
Love it.
Wow, we could talk for another hour.
I know, I could.
Thank you so much. Well, we've got a future podcast, our Friends for a Reason, Friend for a Season, and our next podcast after this, Sarah, you're leading it. What's the topic of that one?
So it's quite a good follow-on from this one, actually. So it's about manifestation mindset.
Cool.
So so I want to really kind of draw in a little bit more about, figuring out what those things are that you want to aim for, and that visualization kind of, and then bringing that to life.
Oh,
perfect.
Cool.
Anybody think we'd planned this? So thank you. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Life Alchemy, and I'm sure you will agree there have been some wonderful gems in there from Chris Cook, from Sarah Yuckland, and from myself, Rosalind Palmer. So do subscribe to our podcast. There are many other episodes of absolute golden nuggets. There's many, many more to come. So do subscribe. We're getting some fantastic feedback from people, and smash that upper limit and have a great day.